Hello there, adventurers, and welcome to Wally DM. I have a really great puzzle for you today. In fact, I've always wanted to do kind of a mystery puzzle, and this is what I came up with. It is kind of like the board game Clue if you mixed it with the video game Silent Hill. Now, let me give you a little bit of the story that I ran in the one-shot for this puzzle. And of course, in the comment section below and after you watch the video, I'd love to hear how you would use it or what kind of a story you would give this puzzle. So the story I ran is the player characters arrived in this village and they had a festival going on. Everyone was having a great time. There was food, there was drinks, there was all kinds of entertainment. Everyone was nice and it was just a ton of fun. We had a lot of great role-playing moments with the NPC-PC interactions and things of that nature. In fact, it even got to the point where the players were getting a little bit suspicious because everything was just great and there was nothing wrong. So behind the scenes as the DM, as soon as the characters entered this village, they're trapped there if they tried to escape. This village was kind of in a lost in time, if you will. And what was holding them there was 6 individuals, and they were very prominent folks of this town, and 5 of them were murdered. One was, let's just say, mysteriously disappeared. Well, as things went on and if the player characters were to get a little bit more inquisitive, some of the townsfolk that were brave enough might just say, help us. And so what was happening is some entity and some very, very powerful magic is holding all of these townsfolk here, keeping them from eternal rest. And they have to play out the same day over and over again. However, if they were to say anything, they risk the chance of getting caught by this evil entity and having their soul burned and never see that eternal happiness, if you will. So as my one shot gained a little bit of speed and the characters made their way to the end, that is where the puzzle began. So once the characters got in the end, they were unable to leave. If they tried to go out the front, they appeared in the kitchen. And they were just stuck there until they figured something out. Now my favorite part is once they figured out something was up, then the inn shifted into another dimension. All of the NPCs and the patrons of the inn and the tap room disappeared, and they were faced with a puzzle to solve. And that is where we're going to get to today. This is going to be a fun one that you can build your own story around or use parts of my story. But this one is called The Mystery of Quiet Hill. Before we get started, just a reminder, if you have not joined our Discord yet, I highly encourage you to do so. Come on over and hang out with me and a lot of cool folks that know a lot about D&D. Also, I have recently updated the tiers and rewards, so please consider supporting us on Patreon. All donations go to support the channel, whether it be through miniatures and terrain for the videos or for future giveaways. So welcome to our inn and the beginning of this mystery. As previously stated, the entire day has been spent joining a festival of a town, and it seems like nothing's out of the ordinary and everything is great and everything is fine. And it has started raining, so our adventurers have come into the inn to seek shelter. Not only that, but they're going to need a place to stay for the night. Now, the first thing I need the characters to do is when they come in is they're going to see the innkeeper. And the innkeeper is going to tell them if they want a room, they better get it now because it's filling up fast. In fact, he only has 2 rooms left to give out. Now, once they get the room for the night, he'll write their names down in the ledger. He may make a comment and state that this ledger contains everyone that has ever stayed at this inn. We'll get back to that in a little bit. Now, after that, it's up to you as the dungeon master as to when this occurs, but what's going to happen is eventually, after maybe some NPC interactions with a few of the patrons in here, conversations with the innkeeper, or what have you, this inn is going to shift into another dimension. Now, what the trigger is for shifting is totally up to you. You could have the characters maybe perhaps ask about some mysterious paintings, which is what I did in my one shot, that there's all these paintings of different famous folks that have visited the town, but there are 6 blurred out paintings, which will actually be part of the puzzle we'll talk about in a little bit. But when the characters in my one shot asked about the paintings, that's when the entire demeanor of all of the NPCs and the innkeeper change. And it's almost as if they mentioned something that was not supposed to be mentioned. Now, another trigger could just be that they all go upstairs and retire and go to sleep for the night. And then during the night, everything shifts into the to the extra dimension. Now this entire puzzle is going to be reliant on some objects that you need to give the players at some point. And the very first one is a hotel room key with the number 6 on it. Now, when they sign into the ledger, this innkeeper is going to give them probably maybe like room 5 and room 2, room 1, room 8, whatever have you. And there's probably 12 rooms in this inn, but he's not going to give them number 6. And if the adventurers go upstairs, and I've got my little upstairs going here, and they go up to the second floor, and they go up and down the halls, they're going to see 12 rooms, and each door is going to have a number by it. But where the number 6 is supposed to be is missing. There's no door, and there's no room number 6. It's just nothing is there. It's just a wall. Now there's several different ways you can give them the key to room 6. Perhaps during the festival they were eating in a pie judging contest and this key was at the bottom of the pie. Perhaps someone decided to hand it to him very secretively before they made it to the inn, or maybe someone in the inn gave it to him. Perhaps they sat over here at this table and the waitress came over and slid them an envelope and said, "Help us," and gave them a envelope that had the key number 6 in there. Now the other thing that the adventurers are going to need is they're going to need to have 5 dolls. So I will use these tokens to represent the 5 dolls that they received. Now when the characters receive these dolls is up to you as the DM. When I ran a one-shot, there was a toy maker and the characters bought 5 different dolls out from the toy maker and they look like the characters. However, when the inn shifted into another dimension, then these same dolls took on different traits and they kind of all look the same except they have different features and they're made of wood with some stuffing. So the first one, and it's going to be represented by this green token, is going to be what looks like a normal looking doll, but there's stuffing coming out of its mouth. And if one of the characters tries to pull out the stuffing, it's just never ending. They can just keep pulling all the stuffing out of the mouth and it's never going to go away. The second one, represented by this purple token, is this doll is going to look normal except for that its head won't stay up straight. So if they try to move the head to make it sit up straight, it just immediately folds over. This third one, represented by the orange token, this doll is badly burned and it smells like fire. The fourth one, represented by the yellow token, is going to be dirty and grimy. And if they investigate it and look at the head of this doll, maybe wipe a little bit of dirt away, they're also going to see that there's a dent in the back of this doll's head. And the fifth and final one, represented by the blue token, this doll looks normal with the exception that it is completely soaked. In fact, it's like a sponge. They could wring out the water, yet more water will still fill it back up. So it is a never-ending sponge. So next, we need to shift our into a different dimension. Perhaps they just see the room getting darker and darker, and it kind of shifts and everything kind of goes to a gray color, and then perhaps the NPCs just start to fade away or just disappear. With the exception of this guy, I'd like to keep the innkeeper in here, and he could help maybe give some simple answers, or maybe even mislead the characters as they're going about, or perhaps maybe give some background as to what's going on here, or along those lines. So perhaps I'll keep the innkeeper here in a little bit of a ghost form that kind of serves as a person to come to if the characters start to struggle with the puzzle. Now what will also happen is now there will be a door over here, and there will be a door over here, and there will be a door back here. So let me introduce the mystery part of this puzzle, and it includes these 6 individuals here. We've got Dr. Mulp, the Captain, Miss Rose, Madame Blanco, Father Verde, and Mrs. Peabody. Now, these paintings are not seen in the real world or in the inn as they're hanging up in the main tap room. And in fact, those paintings are there, but they're probably either blank or have some strange swirls of color or something like that. But once the characters shift into this second dimension, these paintings become visible. And in fact, these names will appear underneath the paintings. And also underneath the paintings is a large spike. So there's a large spike sticking out underneath all of these paintings. Now feel free to rewind this video as many times as you need, but here are the descriptions of the painting that I decided to give. So the first one is Dr. Mulp, or Professor Mulp, however you'd like to do that. And this is a skinny individual with spectacles and an awkward nose. He is dressed in black and purple garb with a fancy hat. He is sitting in a chair holding a book. The second one is the captain. The captain is wearing a military dress uniform with medals, white gloves, and a military sword. He has a thick, sandy, brown handlebar mustache. The third one is Miss Rose. Miss Rose is a beautiful young woman, long, dark black hair, blue eyes, and a brilliant red evening gown. Madame Blanco is in an extravagant, billowing dress of white, purples, and browns held together with a corset. She has black hair that is pinned up and an expensive pearl necklace. The next painting represents Father Verde, who is a middle-aged, overweight, bald man with thick black hair on both sides. He's dressed in robes of priesthood, and his sash has the holy symbol of a sun. Our final painting is Mrs. Peabody. And Mrs. Peabody is dressed in an elegant blue-green dress. She seems to be mid-30s. She has a feather sticking out of her hair that's up in a bun, and she also has a animal fur that is around her neck, and it is held there by a peacock brooch. So now, in order to solve the puzzle, the adventurers are going to have to explore the inn. And I've set this up in the way I'm about to present to you. And of course, you're more than welcome to adjust everything and move it to whatever best fits your story or makes most sense to you. So we're going to explore these one by one. And these are going to be our clues to solving the puzzle. Number 1, the study. So our characters move into this area over here. And this is just your basic study. It's got a few chairs and books and things of that nature. But what the characters will have to do is they'll have to explore this bookcase. And we can put a puzzle, a trap, something like that. But they are going to find a secret door behind this bookshelf here and be able to go into this room. When they go into this room, they are going to see a grisly scene. In the middle of this room is an individual that is hanging from the ceiling, and this individual has now turned into a zombie, and it's making all kinds of nasty zombie sounds, and then trying to, with its feet kicking, trying to turn around and see and attack these adventurers as they come in. But as they see this thing's hanging from the ceiling, they will also see that it is dressed in black and purple garb, and in fact they may find a pair of spectacles that are broken and laying on the ground. Now, if our characters go down into the cellar, they will arrive here, and there is a dirt floor here. And of course, there's all kinds of storage. There's boxes, there's shelves, all kinds of things that you could find in an inn. And then back in this area, we have some wine storage. Now back here in the wine storage, there's only going to be 2 or 3 bottles left. And if they take the time to investigate these bottles, they're going to see that they have been tampered with. And it looks like they've been opened at one time, but put back on the rack to look as if that they had never been opened. And this wine bottle is going to have an image of the sun. Now, as the characters come back through the cellar, as if to go back up the stairs to the kitchen where they came down from, there's going to be a creature that is going to come out of the ground and attack them. And you can use this whatever you want. You can make it a zombie, you can make it a wit, you can make it any kind of undead, you can make up your own, whatever that you decide. But what they're going to see is this creature has what looks like the remains of a fur around its neck, and after they defeated it, or before, or however you'd like to do it, they're going to find a brooch of a peacock. So they're going to find this brooch with a peacock on it. And they may also find in this area an iron rod. Now when our characters go up to the second level of the inn, that's where all the rooms are at. And if they had been up there prior to it shifting into another dimension, they would have seen 1, 3, 5, and 7. That's the number of the room right next to the door. They would have seen 2, they would have seen 4, they would have seen 8. But again, as mentioned previously, they would not have seen a room 6. There would have been no door, and there is absolutely nothing here for them to access. However, after the puzzle shifts into dimension mode, now a door has appeared, and it has the number 6 by it. However, if they go to open it, it is going to be extremely hot. And if they do get the door open, they're going to see this entire room is on fire. But it's some type of a magical ghost-like fire, because it's not going to go past this door or catch into the other rooms. It's just going to be an entire room engulfed in flame. And that is room 6. Now our final clue room is going to be out back. So this is the kitchen here, and perhaps maybe to let the characters know that there is an outside or a back premises that they can access. Perhaps maybe the innkeeper or one of the waitresses ask the characters, say, hey, I'll give you a free drink if you go and fetch some water from the well. They can come back here when the inn is in normal form and get some water out of the well and bring them back in. Or we can just maybe perhaps after they have gone through the entire inn and they haven't made it outside yet, maybe there's a loud banging here, and that will maybe perhaps draw their attention to this. Or perhaps they see like wet footsteps that go and lead out the door. Regardless, our final clue is going to be out back here. So our characters will come through this door and arrive in this area. And I'd like to wait for them all to get outside, but after they do, if you've seen the movie The Ring, that's exactly what's going to happen. In fact, this entire area is going to be like flooded. I mean, it's going to be like ankle deep water, and they're just going to see this water just overlapping this well. And coming out of the well will be this creature here. And this creature does look to be undead, and they are dressed in a tattered and torn red evening gown. So with everything that we've discussed, with the clues, the dolls, the paintings, the key, do you know how to solve the puzzle? I'll give you a second if you'd like to figure it out. Did you get it? Great, let's go over the answer. So at this point, we need to help our players to make sure they understand that each of their 5 dolls that they have need to be pushed onto an iron spike that is under the painting. But of course, we only have 5 dolls and we have 6 paintings. Now I plan to incorporate that into my story, as the 6th person, whoever's left out of this, was probably responsible for the death of the other 5. And in fact, the 6th person is probably still alive and was disguised as an NPC in town that they had met earlier. In my game, I had a baker and a fortune teller. It could have very easily been either one of them, or perhaps an NPC that was in the bar. But we'll get to a little bit more of that in just a second. Let's go ahead and solve the puzzle. So we're looking at Dr. Molp. Again, this is an individual that is dressed in black and purple garb, has an awkward type nose, and a pair of spectacles. If you remember in the study, we found an individual that was hung from the ceiling, and he was dressed in black and purple garb, which would indicate this is Dr. Molp. We also found his spectacles laying on the ground. Now the doll that should be pressed into that, if you remember from earlier, is we had a doll that could not keep its head upright. That probably signifies that that doll's neck was broken, and since Dr. Molp has a broken neck from being hung, then this doll will be pushed onto the iron spike below Dr. Molp's painting. I'm going to skip the captain for a second, but as far as Miss Rose go, if you remember, our 5th and final clue was out back behind the inn, in which the area was flooded with water, the well was overflowing, and out of it came this witch or hag-like creature that was dressed in the tattered remains of a red evening gown. Now that would signify this is probably Miss Rose. Now if you remember our dolls, we have a doll that was like a sponge. It was soaked with water. And since the entire back area behind the inn, and she's coming out of the well in the water, we can assume that the well and water doll will need to be pressed onto the spike underneath Miss Rose. So let's take a look at Mrs. Peabody. If you remember, Mrs. Peabody had a fur that was wrapped around her neck, and it was held together with a peacock brooch. Well, we just so happen to find that undead with the peacock brooch in the cellar as it climbed out of the ground. And also there was an iron rod that could have been there to strike or hit Mrs. Peabody in the back of the head. So we're going to grab our doll that was dirty, indicating it came out of the ground, with a dent in the back of its head, indicating it was hit by the iron rod, and that should be Mrs. Peabody. So we'll attach that doll underneath this painting. If you remember Father Verde, he's a priest, and he has the image of a sun, which is his holy symbol. And down in the cellar, we found a couple bottles of wine that had a sun on them. And if you also remember, we had a doll with stuffing coming out of its mouth. The stuffing could very well represent that that person was poisoned, and in fact, if any of the characters drink that wine that's down in the cellar, they will need to make a saving throw versus poison, because it is indeed full of poison. So now we can assume that the poison doll will get stuck underneath Father Verde because he was poisoned drinking some wine. Now our final clue, so it's either going to be the captain or Madame Blanco that killed all the other 5, or however you put it in your story. Let's go back to room 6. It was on fire, it was ablaze. If the characters decide to put out the fire, they're not going to find anything in there. That room is totally wiped of clues. However, if they remember back in the very beginning when they first arrived at the inn, where the innkeeper told them that he keeps track of everyone that has ever stayed in this ledger, and they come down after the inn has shifted into the other dimension, and they look through this ledger, they'll find it opened up to a date that was 50 years ago or 40 years ago, or however you'd like to do it. And on that date, it says room 6, the captain. And so room 6 is the captain, and that room is on fire, which matches the doll that was burned. And they stick that doll underneath the iron spike of that. And then that only leaves Madame Blanco. And at that point, I would have materialize a hag or another creature. And now we have our end boss fight, as Madame Blanco is the one that killed these other 5, but not only that, she is also still alive and perhaps was out in the village. They encountered her before. She could have been the baker, she could have been the fortune teller, she could have been an NPC in the inn, whatever you decide to make her, but now she comes back and we have our big bad boss fight. After this battle, she's defeated, our puzzle is solved. Now let's talk about what happens next. So for my story, the village of Quiet Hill can now get their eternal rest. And not only that, but our player characters are now find themselves in this village that is abandoned, broken down, run down. The earth has reclaimed it, the forest has reclaimed it, and they're back in present day, and they can continue on with their mission. So I hope you like this puzzle. I really enjoyed creating it. I always wanted to do a mystery puzzle, and what's better way to do one than with the board game Clue? And I thought, well, let's make it a little bit more darker than Clue and make this kind of a Silent Hill / Clue crossover. And I hope you like what I came up with. Now, there are a lot of loose ends, I understand, and that a lot of that revolves around this story. So what I would like to hear from you is, how would you use this puzzle in your game? What type of a story could you include that would make your characters go, or your player characters go, and solve the mystery and solve the puzzle? Please leave a comment below. I am super excited to hear your feedback on this. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and on to the next.
The drowned puppet under Miss Rose. We'll put the professor on the poisoned one that's foaming. We'll put that one under the Reverend.
Oh,
yep.
The professor is the one with the broken neck?
Yeah, we'll put the professor under the broken necked one. And Madam White is the one with blunt force trauma.
Yeah.
Okay. Which means the only one that does not currently have a doll on the spike underneath it is Miss Peacock.
So let's see who the real criminal is.
Well, I swear it's gonna end up being like Pie Lady or something.
No, it's like Scooby-Doo. We reveal the mask as Mrs. Peacock, and it's actually the horse.
The reason why I've kind of had Pie Lady in the back of my mind is gonna sound kind of silly, but it's the feather in the hair. The Pie Lady had the flower in the hair.
Identity switch it out.
But no, so yeah, just an idea. I don't know, something about Pie Lady doesn't add up, because she brings you this box with pie in it, and sure, that's nice and all, but then instead of being pie, it's a key that leads to a murder victim's room, and a doll that has its neck snapped. Like, why would her box contain these things if, at the very least, she's somehow part of this equation? I just haven't completely figured out how, but my closest guess is she might be Miss Peacock.